What's up, party people? It's Christmas time, and the last thing anyone wants is a naked tree. So embarrassing. So let's make a tree skirt. And let's make it fun. What's fun? Pom-poms. I went with an unbleached creamy white because I was being uncharacteristically basic, but you can go with a color or even a print, whatever floats your boat. Let's get it on. First, let's gather our materials. I'm using unbleached muslin, which is insanely cheap, and a variety of cream-colored trims, including the titular pom-pom trim. You can get trims in all sorts of colors, so if this monochromatic neutral palette isn't your thing, go wild. If you've ever followed my circle skirt tutorial, this isn't much different. Most tree skirts are in fact circle skirts. Usually with a circle skirt that will be worn, we're concerned with the waist measurement. But for a tree skirt, the primary measurement we want is the full width. You can go with a standard width. The most common tree skirt widths seem to range from about 44 to 56 inches, probably because that's the width of the fabric they're made out of, and should fit most 6 to 8 foot trees. Or you can measure the width of the bottom of your tree across the widest spread of the branches. I have a 7.5 foot tree, and mine measures about 50 inches across the bottom branches. I'll add 2 inches to that to account for seams and hems and whatnot, and that gives me 52 inches. This number will not only be the width of my skirt, but it is also how much fabric I need. 52 inches wide and 52 inches long. You can also use it to figure out how much trim you need. Multiply by 3.14 to get the amount of trim you need for the hem in inches. In my case, that's 164 inches. If I divide that by 36, I'll have my yardage, which is just a little over 4.5 yards. So I'll buy 5 yards just to be safe. I actually cheated and just bought 5 yards of all my trims. If you want to figure out exactly how much of each trim you'll need, figure out how much space you're going to leave between each row. I'm attaching my trims 3 inches apart. So I'm going to multiply that gap by 2. That gives me 6 inches. So my second row will be 52 inches minus 6 inches in diameter, which is 46 inches. Then we will repeat that math from before. Multiply by 3.14, which gives me 145 inches, divide by 36 inches for the yardage, and I get almost exactly 4 yards. So I saved myself a yard doing it this way. I have 3 rows of trim, so I'll repeat the same deal from before. Take 46 inches, subtract 6 inches, that gives me 40 inches. Multiply by 3.14, divide by 36 inches, and I get about 3.5 yards. Whew. Last but not least, we need some trim for the edges of the skirt slit. You don't need math for that. You need the equivalent of the full width of your skirt, 52 inches for me. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut myself a 52-inch square of fabric. Or actually, I'm going to rip it because muslin rips so nicely. This will ensure a perfectly square square. If you've got a very plain woven fabric, ripping is a great way to get an even square. But if you're using a non-woven fabric or fabric with any sort of decoration like embroidery, beading, or even just a print, you're probably better off cutting. Any way you slice it, we're going to end up with a piece of fabric that is an even square. Now we will fold our square in half, lengthwise, and then widthwise. Take your full width number and cut it in half. For me, that's 26 inches. Starting at the folded corner of my fabric, I will measure out 26 inches all the way around the hem of the tree skirt. The next step is to cut the inner hole, which allows room for the trunk or base of the tree. You might want to adjust this depending on your particular tree, but I'm going with a hole that measures 8 inches in diameter. Since my fabric is still folded in half, I will measure out the radius of that inner hole, which is half of the diameter, 4 inches. Okay, we have the main piece of our circle skirt cut. Before you unfold it, we're going to cut the facing. Take a scrap of your fabric, fold it in half, and line it up with the inner hole of the tree skirt. Cut around the hole and add a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the non-folded side. I want my facing to be about 2 inches wide, so I'll measure 2 inches around the cut edge and cut. I'm using pinking shears on this edge so I can leave it raw. I need a second piece just like this, so all I have to do is fold another scrap in half and use this first facing piece as a cutting guide. Now I'll place the facings right sides together. Stitch and press open. If you've pinked this edge, you're all set. You could also hem it or serge it if you have an overlocker. It won't show on the outside of the skirt, so you could even leave the edge raw if you want. Since it will be stitched down, it shouldn't fray too badly. Back to our skirt. We need a way to get it around the tree in the first place, so that means we need to cut a slit in the fabric. I've left mine folded to make that easier. I just cut along one of the folds. Here we are, laid out flat. Time to finish that inner hole. Lay the facing piece on the skirt, right sides together, and pin around the raw edge. If the facing piece is a little bit longer, that's okay. Just let the extra fabric hang over the slit edges. Stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Since this is a curved seam, we're going to clip it. This will help give a crisp edge when it comes time to turn and press. So every 3/8 of an inch or so, clip into the seam allowance, right up to the stitching line, but not through it. Do this around the whole dang seam. Now we'll turn this right sides out, which in this case means flipping the facing to the underside. If you need pins to keep things in place for this step, go for it. My fabric is behaving itself and holding in place quite nicely. Now we'll press the seam flat, and I'm going to add a few pins before stitching the facing down just to keep things from shifting around. Here's our pressed and pinned inner hole, looking quite smashing if I do say so myself. Stitch the facing down. I like to do one line of stitching right along the edge of the seam, which will keep things looking nice and crisp, and then I do another line of stitching, maybe 1¼ inches or so, to catch the hem of the facing, which will keep everything in place. Now comes the fun part, attaching the trim. Start at one end of the slit and pin your pom-pom trim to the raw hem of the skirt, right sides together, if your trim has a right side anyway. Note that I'm lining the trim right up to that raw edge. Depending on your trim, you might find that clips work better than pins. Stitch the trim to the skirt. You might find a zipper foot works better for this if your trim is very narrow. Mine is just wide enough that I can stitch down the center. Here we are, all stitched on. Now I'll flip the trim to the underside of the skirt. Press the hem so that just the pom-poms stick out from the edge and the trim piece is concealed underneath. Pin it in place. Now we'll top stitch close to the folded edge. Again, you might find a zipper foot makes sewing along your pom-poms easier. I'm doing all right with a regular foot. Here is the finished hem. Magical! You could stop here with just the pom-poms, but I think the more trim the merrier. The next row of trim will be 3 inches above the first, and there will be a third row 3 inches above that. So I'm going to measure 3 inches and 6 inches up from the hem, all the way around the skirt, marking as I go. Following the marked lines, pin and stitch each row of trim on. We're close to done now. I'm adding giant pom-pom ties for closures on my skirt, but this is optional. You could do buttons or ribbon ties. You could even do a zipper. Or you can finish the raw edges and leave it without a true closure. So here are my pom-poms. I'm going to baste them in place along the wrong side of the edge before adding my finishing trim. Then all we have to do is pin and sew the trim in place. If you don't want trim along this edge, you can just turn it under and stitch like a standard hem. Holy night, we're done! No more naked tree, it's a Christmas miracle! Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss my next tutorial. Leave a comment below and let me know how your project turned out. And be sure to visit whatthecraft.com for more crafty tips, tutorials, and kick-ass sewing patterns.